Good of you to join us at this hour. Daniel Choy here with the latest. The possible deployment of a U.S. anti-missile defense shield was a hot topic during a recent parliamentary audit of Korea's embassy in the U.S. Korea's ambassador to the U.S. says the two countries have exchanged information on the THAAD missile defense system, but there were no discussions of deployment. Our Myung-kil starts us off.
Korea and the U.S. have only exchanged information on key features of the THAAD missile defense system, but there have been no discussions of deployment, Korea's ambassador to the U.S. Ahn Ho-young told Parliament in a recent audit of the embassy.
There were consultations on the THAAD missile defense system, but I can assure you that there were no discussions on deploying the system to Korea.
His comments follow remarks by Deputy Defense Secretary Robert Work, who said earlier this month that the U.S. was considering sending a THAAD battery to Korea. That in turn contradicted remarks by Korean officials who have insisted that there have been no discussions on the issue. The possibility of deploying the Theater of High-Altitude Area Defense System in Korea is controversial here, with critics saying it is part of a broader attempt by the U.S. to get its Asian ally to join its missile defense system. Lawmakers in the parliamentary session said they couldn't understand why such a high-level U.S. official would comment on the possible deployment of the anti-missile defense system if there weren't some truth to it.
Why did U.S. Deputy Defense Secretary Robert Work make such remarks on deployment? The embassy should have worked on clarifying why such remarks were made and prevent misunderstandings.
If there were no discussions at the embassy level, then that means discussions were held at the Korea and U.S. government level.
Another concern is that deployment could ignite tensions with China and Russia, who see the move as a threat to their security interests. The two countries oppose the possible deployment of THAAD in Korea. Myung-kil, ARIRANG News.
President Park Geun-hye is expected to make a statement on the current tensions between the two Koreas on Monday as a round of planned high-level inter-Korean talks hangs in the balance. North is furious with the South for not doing enough to stop civic activists from sending anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the border last week. But is it angry enough to call the talks off? Our Shin Se-min reports.
All eyes will be on President Park Geun-hye on Monday. The president has called a meeting of a unification preparation committee where she could deliver a formal statement on the icy relations between the two Koreas. If so, it'll be the first such statement since a group of high-level North Korean delegates arrived in Seoul last week and met with their southern counterparts. Following the delegation's arrival, Pyongyang warned the talks could be canceled if Seoul wasn't able to stop the anti-North propaganda leaflets that crossed the border on Friday. Although it is still unclear whether the talks will go ahead, many observers seem to think it is unlikely that the president will veer from its current policy direction of pursuing inter-Korean talks. On Sunday, the South urged the North to stick to the plan, with Prime Minister Chung Oh-won saying at an athletic event with a group of North Korean defectors that the need for inter-Korean talks is even greater given various pressing humanitarian aid issues. He said that although there may be challenges ahead, if the North is sincere about the talks, the two Koreas will eventually be able to come together. On Friday, the North fired anti-aircraft machine guns in an attempt to bring down dozens of balloons flown by South Korean civic groups containing anti-Pyongyang propaganda. Some of the North machine gun rounds landed south of the border, prompting the South Korean military to fire back around 40 K6 machine gun rounds of its own, drawing additional fire from the north. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
North Korea has made improvements to its missile launch system in order to carry out its young leader's orders to swiftly launch projectiles. According to multiple South Korean government sources, Pyongyang has been automating its missile launch system and consolidating its military strength in order to speed up the process. Experts have noted that the North has increased the accuracy of certain missiles over the past year or two. They also say the improvements are being carried out to unify the command system and give more power to leader Kim Jong-un. Korea has openly criticized the Japanese Foreign Ministry for deleting from the ministry's website a 1995 appeal for donations for victims of Japan's wartime sexual slavery. Hiroshi Yamada, a member of the opposition party for Future Generations, proposed removing the 1995 article on October 6th, referring to the line, "Particularly brutal was the act of forcing women, including teenagers, to serve the Japanese armed forces as comfort women." Yamada said the description in the appeal is misleading and said he does not believe that Japan forced women to serve in frontline brothels during wartime. It seems Japanese Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida agrees, since the article in question was deleted recently. Seoul plans to bring up the incident when it raises the issue of Japan's wartime sex slavery at the UN on Monday. 3 Chinese fishermen have been jailed for acts of violence against Korea Coast Guard officers who were conducting a crackdown on illegal fishing in Korean waters. During the crackdown operation on Friday, the Korea Coast Guard officers reportedly encountered fierce resistance from the Chinese fishermen who tried to strangle the Korean officers and threatened them with knives. The captain of the Chinese boat was killed following a scuffle during the same raid, and 16 other crewmen are being investigated for instigating violence during the incident. There have been several clashes between the Korea Coast Guard and Chinese fishing boats. In 2013, the Korea Coast Guard arrested roughly 183 Chinese fishermen for illegal fishing in the West Sea. The price of mobile phones in Korea is the highest in the OECD. A report by the Ministry of Science, ICT and Future Planning showed the initial prices upon release for basic and premium phones last year over $230 and $512 US dollars, the highest in the OECD. Neighboring country Japan had the second highest mobile phone prices, and Finland came in third. This has raised concerns about a possible price bubble or whether manufacturers are making an excessive profit in Korea, where the country's gross national income per capita ranks as the 25th in the OECD. Some positive news from Korea. Korea's homegrown patent valuation system will soon be used by other countries. First in the United Arab Emirates, then throughout the Middle East and beyond. Our Kim Hyun-bin has this report.
Patent evaluations are currently underway in Dubai, with judges closely inspecting possible new inventions and innovations. The city grants over 1,500 patents annually, but this year is getting help from the Korean Intellectual Property Office. Under a deal signed in May, the United Arab Emirates will soon be able to evaluate its intellectual property based on Korea's patent system.
The UAE's patent department lacks personnel, so we are acting as their proxy.
Through our research and visits to many countries, and also with the cooperation of the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, we learned that the Korean system is one of the best systems.
As one of the most influential countries in the IP field, Korea doesn't plan on just exporting its intellectual property system to Dubai, but all throughout the Middle East to assist less developed countries.
As our patent system will be implemented in the UAE, we believe it will contribute to the country's knowledge economy.
The Korean Intellectual Property Office has also set its sights on cooperating with countries in Southeast Asia and Africa to further establish international patent standards and protect local innovations. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
The international community is scrambling to stop the Ebola epidemic after the number of deaths attributed to the virus rose to 4,000 last week, with some projections suggesting it will surpass 1 million by January. In Spain, the focus is on whether medical professionals are equipped to treat Ebola patients. There, a nursing assistant became sick after treating an Ebola-stricken Spanish missionary. The U.S. will screen travelers from West Africa arriving at 5 major airports, and airports in Canada and Europe plan to take similar steps. Meanwhile, Cuba, a nation of 11 million people with a GDP of $6,000 per capita, is planning to dispatch over 400 health workers to Sierra Leone. Global health officials say the only way to contain the outbreak is to eliminate it at its source in West Africa. Hong Kong's embattled chief executive vowed to stay in office and warned students demanding his resignation that their pro-democracy movement was out of control. On Sunday, C.Y. Leung said in an interview with a local TVB station that he will continue trying to talk with student leaders, but did not rule out the use of minimum force to clear the blockade of key parts of the Asian financial hub, now entering its third week. Leung also warned that there was zero chance that China's leaders would change their decision limiting democracy in Hong Kong. Although the mood in most protest areas has been festive, tensions escalated in the Mong Kok district with scuffles reported between police and protesters overnight. And Iraqi officials are urging the U.S. and its coalition to provide immediate military support in western Anbar province, which they fear could fall to Islamic State militants. If the Islamic State militants were to capture Anbar, located just west of Baghdad, they would be able to establish a supply line and potentially launch attacks on the Iraqi capital. Islamic State fighters have already seized control of large swaths of territory in Syria, where they are currently pushing to take over Kobani. Although the U.S. has carried out several airstrikes there, the Islamic State militants are still advancing in the province. A U.S. defense official speaking on the condition of anonymity said American troops in Anbar are holding their own, but it's tough going. And now the weather. It seems like the indirect impact of Wongfong will be continuing to be felt on Monday, with up to 150 millimeters of rain in affected regions including Jeju and Yeongnam. And now let's check out the weather conditions in your neck of the woods and around the world. And that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you for watching. Have a great start to your week.